You're tuned in to Just One Hot Mom with host Nanika Ansari. Get ready. She's about to bring you that fire, that flavor, that heat, all that passion, and more from around the world and in your neighborhood. Stay tuned.
Hey, hotties, you are tuned in to Just One Hot Mom. I am your host, Nanika Ansari, and today I am on with Darlene Collins, and we are talking about an adoption story. Hi, Darlene.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, so I thought it was interesting. Here it is. We have so much going on in our community, and there are so many women in our community with amazing stories. There are so many with testimonies and victories that you can't even imagine them. So I like to share those stories of triumph with you, and Darlene has a true story of triumph. So let's get it started. Did you always know that you were adopted? Was it, or did you find out later on as you got older?
I officially was told when I was 12, but it was sort of one of those situations where I knew something was off. I just couldn't put my finger on it. So when I was told, it was more of a relief. Like, oh, okay. That
It
explains a
made
lot.
sense. Was it like you
Yeah.
didn't look like everybody else, or what was the thing that was
Right.
off?
I didn't look like anybody in my family. And I grew up with an older brother who was my adoptive mom's biological child, and they were almost identical twins. So, and our complexions, they were extremely darker than I was. And so everybody would always question, like, where did I come from?
And so you found out when
So,
you were 12 years old. Do you remember how you felt when you found out? Was it like a relief, or was it like, oh my God?
no, actually, it was a relief because, like I said, I was like, oh, that explains a lot. And then I thought it was cool. I went to school the next day and told everybody. Um, and we never actually discussed it after that point. We
So you
never
have
talked about it.
you have a great story, because it was like, okay, something feels off with these people that I live with. Like, we're family, but I feel like there's something else going on. So you find out at 12 that you're adopted. So after
Yes.
finding out that you were adopted, did you instantly become curious about your birth parents, or was that later on in life?
I would ask questions every now and then. I think the first question I asked her when she told me was if my brother knew. And she was like, well, yeah, he knows. But like I said, we never really discussed it. There was never like, us fighting and he brought out that I was adopted or anything like that. And we never talked about it until I graduated from high school. And that's when I kind of was interested in, finding out more.
Okay.
And so I asked what little questions I could, and she gave me some answers that she had and some things she made up. But yeah, so I got probably serious about it when I turned about 19.
Okay. Now, how did you finding out you were adopted impact your relationship with your mom?
I don't think it really impacted it at that time. We were really different. And my mom was a single mom, so she raised my brother and I alone. She had to work multiple jobs. So I was a latchkey kid. And again, we were very different. And so I was very girly. She wasn't. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't like to shop unless you could do it in a catalog. So all the things that I probably would have done with my mom, we didn't do. And so she was very close to my brother, but I did always kind of feel sort of this
There was a
gap.
disconnect.
Yeah. And I'm not, again, I didn't even attribute it to, her not being my biological mother, but just her personality. And she was a workaholic, really. And so she was always at work. I basically was a loner and did things. I had interests that I did myself. And so, and even as an adult, we were mother and daughter, but we really weren't close. And I won't say that in a negative way. We were different people.
It's just, I think it's just a different person. Like everybody expects mother and daughters to have these really close, tight, and they're like, that's my mom, yay. And you are two different people, especially when you become an adult. You're a different person as an adult than you are as a kid. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I just had a question on my mind. So did you, I can't remember what I meant to say. You caught me off guard with that one. Like we was close,
Oh, I'm
but
sorry.
we
I'm sorry.
wasn't close. No, it's okay. So, did you, knowing that you were adoptive, attribute to you becoming an adoptive parent?
I think it made me more comfortable. I actually became an adoptive parent because I could not have children, but
Mm-hmm.
it was an easy decision. I didn't struggle with it. I was just, once I decided that having them biologically wasn't going to happen, the next thing I was like, ooh, I'll just adopt. And so I think it made the decision easier. It's a tough decision. You have to parent someone else's child that is not related to you by DNA. And some people struggle with that. So for me, it was a no-brainer. And I'm not sure I would have done it. I mean, honestly, I'm not sure I would have done it if I could have given birth.
Mm-hmm.
But because I couldn't, it was an easy decision.
Okay,
And,
so
I kind of thought going into it that my son and I would have something in common and I would
mm-hmm.
understand him more. Little did I know that it didn't work that way. But,
You better leave him alone. I know Darlene's son,
no, I
and
know, no, I know me. I know you know Spencer, but no, I don't mean it like that. I mean it like, and we can get into that later. But since I found my birth parent, it
mm-hmm.
has opened up a lot of questions that I never thought to ask him about. So,
Well, that's
that's why.
so. When you became an adoptive parent and stuff, did you have an open? Did you always let him know that he was adopted, or did you wait until you felt like he was old enough to understand? Like you were 12 when you found out. Did you wait till he was 12? Or I kind of know the answer to this, but I want to find out your reasoning behind having the type of adoption that you have with Spencer.
No, he always knew. And we always treated it, if any questions came up, the normal questions about, well, when I was in your tummy and all that stuff, I would
Mm-hmm.
always respond with, no, you were in someone else's tummy. And, a cute story is one day he did that. He said that to me. And I said, well, no, you were in someone else's tummy and you came home with mommy and daddy. And he was like, well, I didn't like that stomach anyway. I said, oh, okay. But my son Spencer is in a unique situation because he had an older brother that the grandparents were raising, and the grandparents reached out to us through our social worker and asked if they could be in contact. And so he actually grew up knowing his maternal side of it. So he knew the whole family except for his birth mother. His birth mother was estranged from them, and so but he knew he got to go to family reunions. He would go over there and spend the weekend, spend a few weeks with them. His brother would come to me and spend the weekend. So he actually was in a better situation than I was because he knew his maternal side of the family.
Now, do you feel like you would have wanted that type of relationship for yourself, the type of relationship you offered Spencer? Would you wish that you would have had that if the opportunity would have been made available to you?
In hindsight, yeah. Now that I know things that I know, yes, I would have any contact would have been appreciated. People don't understand that, you know, um, adoptees are usually treated as you should be grateful,
Mm-hmm.
because you're like, someone took you in, and that any curiosity that you may have many times is not understood.
Mm-hmm.
But you, when you grow up and you can look at your parents and see, I got, my mom's nose, my dad's eyes, or whatever. Um, it's something that you always miss, and never having answers, you want those answers. And so, yes, any kind of contact would have been welcomed and would have been great for me.
And see, I think it's a misconception that you're ungrateful if you're curious about where you came from. Most of us are curious about where we come from. You know, we want to know our history, the details. We want to know our ancestors. Like, why? Like, I know in our family, it's like Isha has hazel eyes. And it's like, you know, nobody, you know, where does that come from? And so people who know their DNA are curious. So why would it be different for an adoptee? But I'm glad that you mentioned and you brought it up, like you're treated differently. Like you should just be grateful that somebody took you in. Why do you think people feel like you should just be grateful? And what would you tell somebody who said that to somebody that was adoptee or even a foster kid? Like you should be grateful that somebody took you. How does that make you feel as an adoptee?
You know, I think I'll answer why I think people say it. People say it, I think, because they feel any kind of curiosity about your birth family is disrespectful to your adoptive family. Like it is hurtful to them. So that I think is one of the reasons they say it. And the whole gratitude thing is that, you know, a lot of times I'm told, well, you could have been aborted. You could have not been placed, grew up in you know, well, when I was
Foster
born, I
care,
guess they
orphanage.
and, you know, so,
I'm not gonna tell your age.
that's okay. But, you know, I think it's just, it's a concept that, especially and honestly in the Black community, adoptions are, you know, when I was born were rare, because usually you kept that in the family. So if you were a teenager and got pregnant, you either raised it or, you know, grandma
Your
took you
auntie, your
in,
grandma.
or auntie, right? And so for a formal stranger adoption, that wasn't very common.
No, okay, I remember the question I wanted to ask. Was your mom always a single mom or did she become a single mom?
Well, that's another interesting twist to my story. So, when you're adopted, your original birth certificate is sealed, and then you're reissued a new one, and it has the date on it. So, and I'll tell my age because I don't care. I was born in '67, but my birth certificate wasn't amended until like '72. And one day I asked my mom, I'm like, well, why did it take so long? And she said at the time, my father was in the service, my adoptive father, and in Vietnam. So they actually let me come home with her, but told her that if he did not come home alive, that they would remove me because she could not adopt as a single parent.
Wow.
So I was like in limbo for all
a couple
those years.
Wow.
Yeah. And, you know, thank God he came. But
I never
came back
even
home.
know. You know what? But you think like in our system, there are so many African American kids waiting to be adopted. It's like if there's somebody that's available, willing, and ready, and they have the means to adopt, why wouldn't you let them? I'm sure that's not the case now. I would hope it's not.
Oh,
like,
no. But back then, I was like, I always thought that was pretty interesting. But to answer your original question, my parents divorced when I was 2. So literally, the ink wasn't dry, and
it was like you're here, okay.
Yeah.
So,
and then
I think that was my question.
Wasn't a part of my life. He really wasn't a part of my life going forward after that.
Okay, because you know, I was just thinking like back then, now that we're talking about back then, like to be a single parent, you know, growing up in our communities was like, you know, you get this look of shame back then, like, well, why don't you have a husband? Why do you have those 2 kids?
Right.
So to be a single mom and have a kid that you've adopted and there's no man, I can only imagine the struggle that she had to go through to be like, these my kids, leave me alone, let me be.
Well, you know, there's a lot of unique twists to my story. My adoptive mom had my brother when she was 14.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so she already had a 5-year-old when she adopted me.
Wow. Darlene, you got a good story. I didn't know all of that. I knew part of the story.
Yes. And ironically, she was 20. My birth mother was 19.
Wow. So they were like the same age. Ooh.
Yeah, they were the same age.
Okay, so you decide to embark on your adoption journey. When did you decide to do that?
Like I said, when I was about 19, I got serious about it and started researching what information I could get. So fast forward maybe a few years, maybe 5 years later, the internet it kind of just new. We were, email. I remember I had email because I have all my papers, so I'm going back on it. But I was born in California, and as I said originally, my birth certificate is sealed, but you can get what they call non-identifying information. So technically, I'm supposed to be able to call Children and Family Services, request my records, and they're supposed to send me everything and black out any identifiable information like names and addresses. I got a partial file. It was not the entire file. I made a phone call and started asking more questions based on the information I had. So basically all I had was a paragraph description on both my parents, that they were in college, and that's pretty much it. So over the course of this conversation, I asked, well, does it indicate what school they went to? And the lady gave me the name. So I found out they attended Howard. And then at the time, the birth registry was online. So I typed in my name. I'm hesitating because I don't know if I'm on here. Okay.
No, you're
so I
still on,
typed in my name and I typed in my date of birth. And ironically, again, I was the only girl born in that county on that day.
Wow.
And so I was baby girl last name. And it was such a common name, I thought it meant Jane Doe for an African American. So I never even realized that was my name. And so, that's back when people would have had to use the white pages and, yellow pages and things of that nature. So I tried searching for the doctor that delivered me, that was on my birth certificate, all of those things. No luck. So I would find out little tidbits of information and kind of just put it down for a while. Fast forward to a couple years ago, I was in Ohio. Ohio opened their records so that if you are an adoptee born in Ohio, when you turn 18, you can request your original birth certificate. Honestly, I got jealous. So I said, well, I'm going to request my information again. So I requested my information from California again, got more information. I got all of the social worker notes and a nice cover letter that said, your birth mother's name is, and gave me her first name with the last initial. Well, the last initial matched the name I already had. So in that instance, I had her full name. And basically from there, read through the notes, confirmed they went to Howard, found out that my uncle was also a senior at the same time that my mother was a freshman. So I was able to find my uncle. And then I started contacting people. He never responded, but nowadays you can pretty much find anybody. So with the names, I was able to locate my mother. But honestly, I found her through my grandfather's obituary. I called the funeral home, said I was doing some genealogy research. Would you have a copy of the program?
It froze. Hold on, darling. Okay, there we go.
Sorry.
It's okay.
It's interesting to know my birth mother was calling me. Anyway, her ears must be burning. They sent me the program, and that helped me with all the names I was missing. So I found out I had siblings, found them on Facebook, but of course I couldn't just send them a message and say, hey, I'm your sister. So found an email from my mom after calling my grandmother for a couple times and trying to get her to call me back. We corresponded in email with her thinking that I was a high school classmate. Come to find out, she really did have high school classmates named Darlene. And she finally called me. So
you were
she
a real
me back.
detective, honey. That's like the FBI.
Yes,
it ain't nothing
girl.
like a black mama. When we looking for something, we will find the information.
The power of the internet. So found her in literally 3 weeks after I got my letter. And we talked. She confirmed who she was. And of course, I asked her the elephant in the room, what's the name of my father? She gave me his name. I hesitated for about 6 months before I really started searching for him. But, again, irony. My grandmother's, I attended my birth mother's funeral 3 weeks later after my birth father's mother died in the same funeral home. So again, I reached back out to this funeral home and was like,
they are not answering any more of your questions.
Right. I was like, can I get a copy of the program for this woman? Found my uncle on my father's side first. He wouldn't return my calls. So I had 4 numbers. 2 were disconnected. 1 I knew was his ex-wife. So I figured that she either hated him and would give me all my information or she would pass on the information. So when I contacted her, informing her that I was looking for him, she passed on my information. He called me about a week later, and that's how we connected.
Wow. Were you at any point in time like scared to be like, you know what I'm saying? Like you are taking a big risk contacting these people, contacting the funeral home. At some point were you like, okay, it's too much. Like I'm getting information that I want, but it's like overwhelming.
No, I'm going to say honestly not, because at the time I had connected with a really good support group. And because a large group of people were receiving their information and doing the same thing I was doing, we were doing it together. So I had a good support group, and we were encouraging each other. As a matter of fact, one of my friends, we found our birth mothers at the same time, and she was the one that pushed me to go ahead and finish finding my birth father, because I kind of sensed that my birth mother wouldn't like that information. So I was kind of holding back. But it was something I needed to do. My siblings on my mother's side had known about me since they were teenagers. My siblings on my father's side found out 6 months before I made the phone call. So
wow. That's some news to find out, honey. That's some news.
Yeah.
So what was your first meeting like? Like, okay, I'm going to meet my mom, the person who gave birth to me. Like, Miss Peggy was your mom for sure.
Yeah.
But now you're going to meet the lady that gave birth to you. What was that first meeting like?
Oh, it was nerve-wracking. At the time, both my parents were living in Maryland. So I flew to DC. I had a girlfriend with me because she was already there for a conference, so that was helpful. It was weird. It wasn't what I had pictured. You have it in your mind. She came to the hotel. She was in the lobby. I came downstairs, and it was just hello. Like I know when you tears.
Did you look?
It was just kind of like hi.
But did you look like her at all? Did you guys look like you did? So was it like, okay, I'm looking at all your features to see where I look like you?
Yeah. So we're, same height, complexion. I have her nose, which so
I've seen her picture.
Yes, I have her nose. So, that's what everybody says when they see the picture. Oh, we know where you got your nose from. So it was just, and then my sister was there. So, I do favor my sister, or she favors me, I guess. I'm the oldest. So it was weird. It was weird for the first time to actually see people that looked like me. And, it was a little awkward too, because they don't know me. And I didn't know them. So we've managed to, work through the ups and the downs. We forged a really great relationship today. But it was weird. I'm not going to lie. It was weird. It was like, I don't know you.
That you're grown. You're a grown woman.
And I was also afraid of rejection. So for me, that was my biggest fear. Like I was grateful that she was willing to meet me, but I was afraid of rejection. And again, my grandmother was still alive, but my grandmother did not want to meet me. So, and she died 6 months later without us ever meeting. And so that's something I have to kind of carry. But,
You have to
and I
process
respect
that
her
still.
decision. She was 94 years old. So, I respect her decision, but it's part of the process that you have to work through. Everybody thinks reunion is this cool, happy time, and it is. But with the flip side of that is you're grieving. So you have to go through grief. And it's usually latent grief because you never really thought about it. And so I went through this whole thing of grieving the mother I didn't have, that in my mind I was supposed to have. I never grew up with sisters. I have 3 now. So it's a lot, I tell people the irony is when I first connected with my mom, there were no tears. It was very
nice to
very
meet you,
calm.
ma'am.
Yeah, even the first phone call, it was like, I kind of say it's like talking to customer service. And I know she was in shock, right? But my father, I couldn't get 2 words out and he starts crying. So it was like the flip side. Like I got the reaction I thought I would get from my mother, from my father.
So how was it
and when
an in-person meeting with him?
Oh, well, that was interesting. There were a lot of tears from both him, my siblings, and the weekend that I went to meet him, he threw a party. So there were like 65 people. And so yeah, we had a big old
He
coming
was
out
ready.
party.
He was like,
He was ready.
he was ready.
Yes, he was so proud and happy, and he was nervous though. He really was nervous. But it was a good time. It was a good time.
So now you know both of your parents. And so what is your life like now with your siblings? Like, you've come in and you've had to be able to mingle with these people because you guys are family. What is life like now? How many siblings do you have now? You went from having 1 sibling to how many?
5. So I went from being the youngest of 2. And, as you know, my brother actually passed away shortly after I found my birth mother, to being the oldest of, I guess, including me, would have been 6. And then last month, I lost my sister on my father's side. So, but I've been blessed because all of them have accepted me as their sibling. So, there's always going to be the asterisk, but, we talk regularly. They call me sister, on my mother's side, I don't get to see my siblings as much. My sister lives overseas, and my brother, we just don't get to see each other. But I do get to see my siblings on my father's side more often. I would visit them more often because they were close when I was in Cleveland. But cousins have all accepted me, aunts, uncles, even my father's ex-wife lays claim to me. And he's married now to another woman, so they both kind of fight over me. But it's just been a blessing because I walked into this expecting that no one would want to have a relationship. So the best I was hoping for was my questions answered, and was willing to just let it go and leave, back out slowly. But it has been such a blessing. Both my parents attended my son's high school graduation. So that was a blessing. Yeah, go Spencer.
Now you mentioned earlier that you were in a support group. How common is a story like yours? Do people actually get to see the brighter side of what reunion could look like, or is your story very rare from what you know from being in that support group?
I'm going to say that positive outcomes are the norm.
Really?
I think they happen more times than not. There are some very tragic stories as well. Some people find graves. So, and when I say that, that means they, by the time they discover and find the person,
Mm-hmm.
they realize that they're, deceased. But maybe the parent's deceased, but you find your sibling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there are times when, especially with birth mothers, depending on what the circumstances were, they're just not ready. And so it may take
Mm-hmm.
some years. I know some adoptees, they actually located their birth mother, but it took 10, 15 years before that person was ready. And then when they're ready, it's a fabulous thing. Um, Sometimes we go through the honeymoon phase where at first it's all great. And then after the novelty wears off, there's some tough things that we have to go through. And then some
Mm-hmm.
people do meet and may have been a secret and never told anybody. And so that person has to be faced with, what do I do now? And so as the adoptee, we have to respect where they're at. We can't force it. Um, and, it all depends on the circumstances. My parents were just college students who decided they didn't want to get married, and their parents were like, yeah, we can't have this, so she's got to be placed. But some people find that, their parents were on drugs, and, they
Mm-hmm.
were taken from their parents. I know some adoptees that have maybe there's like 4 or 5 siblings. The mother kept one, placed the next one, kept the next 2, placed the next one. So I mean, that's a lot to deal with,
Yes,
to
but I
find
wanted
out that she
to,
kept some of them
but didn't
and
keep
not kept
you.
all of them.
And see, I wanted to bring you on today because you know what? Those are the only stories we hear sometimes. We hear these very tragic, detrimental stories that I think sometimes deter people from wanting to foster kids or from wanting to go through the adoption process. I think sometimes we hear these stories and we feel you're like, no, it's going to be too much work. I'm going to be hurt in the process. We don't hear the stories of victory. Like you have a victorious story.
As I said, I have been so blessed. Even adopting my son.
Mm-hmm.
My son was a week old, so he was a newborn. We went through the county services. It's almost unheard of that you get a newborn through the county unless they're a
Mm-hmm.
sibling group. So he's been the only family we know. He's known. We got to pick him up from the hospital. Um, I like to tell people I did the drive-through method. But it's been a blessing. I mean, and back to the gratitude, I would run into people and they would find out that he was adopted and they would say, oh, that's just such a wonderful thing you did. And I always respond with, it's the most selfish thing I did. I did it because I wanted to be a parent, So, I love him to death. I couldn't love him anymore. Um, he's now in reunion. Oh, I won't call it a full reunion, but he's in contact with his birth mother.
Wow.
I support that. His story, I won't say his story is as positive as mine,
Mm-hmm.
but it's something I know he needed to do, and it was something we never talked about. But again, he was with me every step of the way for my reunion, and I'm thankful for that. And so again, you're right. They're all from 1 to 10. There's all kinds of facets of how reunions occur and how the relationship grows from there. I know my one friend, she found her birth mother died 6 months later. That's, I can't even imagine. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
have enough time, or, but, with the onset of DNA, people it's becoming easier to find people,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. But you just never know what's on the other side of that. You just really don't. And it's nerve-wracking, and it's a risk. And I took it, and thank God it's been positive for me.
So what would you say to the person who's watching now who know that they're adopted or they just found out that they're adopted and they want to seek out their birth family? What is some advice you would give them that you wish somebody would have given you?
Like I said, I was blessed because I was part of a support group prior or during my search.
Mm-hmm.
That's my biggest recommendation. Is there are online support groups. There are support groups in your area, or there should be. If you're in Cleveland, Adoption Network Cleveland is a great resource. They will actually assist you with your search if that's, what you're doing, or just going to a support group. And the support group is not only adoptees, they call it the triad, but it would be adoptive parents, adoptees, and birth parents. So sometimes
Wow.
just hearing the stories from a birth parent's um, point of view is helpful in helping you understand. Some adoptees are angry. You
Mm-hmm.
find out you're adopted, and then you have to kind of wrestle with what was wrong with me. As an adult, I struggle with rejection issues, and
Mm-hmm.
it does stem from being adopted. I struggle with a lot of insecurity and things of that nature. And now that I have all my information, I see now it really stems from the fact that I was adopted and kind of growing up thinking there was something wrong with me, that someone gave me up. And
Wow.
so that is, and I went through my anger. All the stages of grief. I went through the anger and, you know, all of those things. And I still have triggers today where I will get in my feelings, as I call it. Um, and my birth mother and I have to work through that. And she's fabulous. She, I can tell her, I'm having a moment. um,
I need this
and
moment, Mom.
yeah, I need this. And, and I have to be sensitive to the things she's going through as well. I went to counseling. I think that was very important for me. Um, I hate to say, my adoptive mom passed away before I found my birth mother. For me, that was a good thing. I mean, it doesn't sound right, but I didn't have that added layer of having to deal with her
Of feeling
feelings
guilty because,
and
right. No,
mhm,
I get
or
it. I
feeling
get
like I had
exactly what you're
betrayed
saying.
her or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I can keep her memory intact. She's my mom. She raised
Mm-hmm.
me. That is never going to change. I had some family members that were not happy with me, and
Mm-hmm.
because they felt I had betrayed her memory. But my brother, he really was not interested in meeting my birth families, or anything like that. And, I respected that. So it was something I went through alone.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had some family members that were very um, excited for me, and supportive. So that meant a lot. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
my best advice is, when you're going through your search, know who you can talk to. Don't try not to take it so personally, people that don't understand. And it's not your job to explain it to them, but you have every right to discover who you are, and what what your story is. And you
Mm-hmm.
own that story no matter what it is. I mean, I will tell you, every time I go to the doctor and they ask me, does this run in your family? Does this run in your family? I would have to just say, I'm adopted. I have no family history. The first time I
Wow.
went to the doctor after having a conversation with my birth mother, he was looking at me so crazy because I was like, oh, I know this, I know this. And I was
That's
so
got to be an
excited because I
amazing
finally had a medical
feeling.
history.
That's,
Yes, I was like, I
yes.
got a medical history. Um, it's in, DNA is real. It's interesting. I was the only person in my adoptive family to go to college. But then I found out that my maternal grandmother, my maternal grandfather went to college on a full scholarship. My paternal grandparents had master's degrees. And you're talking in the 40s that my maternal grandmother um,
Was
had
in cop.
a
Wow.
master's degree.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what I'm
something.
saying? And she was the first Black school teacher in Baltimore County Schools. And so, there was, every time I hear things like that, I get kind of, puff my chest out,
Well, that's a
somehow I'm
part of your
related.
legacy. That's a part of your
Yeah,
history too.
somehow I'm related to one of the Little Rock Nine. Um, so, just things of that nature. I'm like, wow, but I'm like, I just always knew I was going to college. There was no question. And I don't know if it's because it's like, all my siblings went to college. Um, all my uncles went to
Maybe
college.
we could prove a fact here that when you speak life into your womb, like people could think that you're
Yeah.
crazy. Like, oh, if you talk to the baby when you're pregnant, but your mom was in school at Howard, you know what I'm saying? She might have been
Yeah.
planting that seed all along. And so she left you with more than
Yeah.
just her looks and her DNA. She could have planted that seed of you're going to go to college too. Maybe not on my dime, but you're going to go.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
my grandmother wanted to be a fashion designer. She wanted to design clothes. She was an excellent seamstress, from what I understand. I went to school for fashion design. So,
and you
it's just like,
sew. You're pretty
wow.
good. You're a sewer, right? Like I've seen you
I
reupholster some
feel,
stuff.
I'm sure I'm not as good as her, but yeah, I can sew. And, I have a lot in common with my mom. I am a thrift store fanatic. My father is just as bad. So it's like, I'm like, I don't know if that's DNA or what, but just to see things that are in common, that we have in common is like, wow. Because growing up, I didn't share anything in common with my mom, so it was difficult to make that connection with her. And I was jealous of the connection that her and my brother had. They were, but you have to understand, she had them young, so they grew up together, but they were
Right.
very close, very close.
And their story is always going to be different. Teen mom stories with their kids are always going to be a little bit different. And
Right.
they can go negative or positive depending upon, the support system that teen mom has. So I'm so excited and happy for you. But since you're an
Thank you.
adoptee, but you're also an adoptive parent, what would you say to the woman who's considering adopting right now? Like, maybe like she doesn't have any issues where she can't have a kid, but she's single, she's not looking to get married, but she still wants to be a mother. What are you speaking into that person now who's looking to adopt?
I always encourage people to look into adoption. And because there are, as you said earlier, there are a lot of children that just need families. They just want to be loved. And that's what being a parent is, loving a child. And it doesn't matter if you share DNA, because that child doesn't care. The only thing I do tell people that talk to me about, considering adopting, is to always be open, because there is going to come a time when that child's going to want answers, and they deserve those answers. So the earlier that you can wrap your head around that and don't take it personal, it's more enriching for your child. And it's different today. It's different today. And it all depends too on the age. A lot of people are adopting children that are older, toddler, 4 or
Excuse me.
5, even into their preteens. Um, and I know, depending on what their background is, it can be difficult. But at the same time, all it takes is some love and commitment. But being honest and open with your child, letting them express themselves about their feelings is very, very important. And that is usually the advice I give is, embrace their adoption story. Embrace that. Don't try to erase their history. I mean, sometimes that happens where, you're our you're in our family now.
That's
Don't
all
worry
you
about
need to
that.
know.
That's all you need to know. And I love my mother, bless her heart. I'll tell you this real quick. She, I asked her about my name, and she would always say, well, you know, I got your name off a birthday cake. Your name should be Darling. And I'm like, Darling? And she was like, yes, but the nurse spelled it wrong. So I just kept it. I bought that story for 40 some years until one day I told it to someone. And the minute I said it, I realized there was never a nurse involved because she didn't give birth to me.
I love Peggy. I love the fact that
Right.
she had
So
a story
like,
ready for you.
yeah, that can't be true, right? But she was gone by then. So like, bless her heart, she tried to give me a story, but I would have much rather her had just, you know, told me what the truth was. And you know, so you know, I've always told Spencer, you know, you can ask me anything. I'll be open and honest with you. I was real happy that his grandparents reached out to us because the first thought I had is when he has those questions, someone's gonna have the answers for them, and I won't have to say I don't know. You know, again, his adoption was a little different. So I actually walked out of the hospital with his birth mother's name, which I wasn't supposed to have, but I held on to it for dear life because I wanted him to have that opportunity to find her later. But the most important thing is when you bring a child into your family, they come with their story, and it's their story, and they should own it, and you should be supportive in helping them own that story.
Well, Darlene, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us. Like, I knew bits and pieces of it because I follow you on social media, and Darlene is really good friends with my mom. But I was excited to get the story, to tell it to other people because, like I said, all too often, we only hear the horrors. Like, we don't give our people a story that they can say, like, you can actually have a positive outcome. And so we have people that are scared to adopt or scared to look into adoption as an option for them if they want to give up a baby. We have people that are scared to do that. And so I was happy that you agreed to come on today and to tell your story so that people can see that it's not all bad, that there is a light at the end of that tunnel. So thank you so much, Darlene. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I would like to add too, now that you bring up, birth parents and having to make that tough decision, today it's different. A birth mother can make a plan for her child that includes contact. A birth parent can make a plan today where they get to choose who the parents are. And so it's come a long way. There's still a long way to go. But the taboo is not as prevalent as it used to be.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Hey, hotties, you guys have been tuned in. And I just want to leave you with this note that we often sometimes in the media, just in stories that we hear, often hear a negative story. And that's what we go with. And that's what we tend to let the seed get planted. And that's what gets nourished, that there's going to be a negative outcome. Darlene just proved to us that sometimes, though, there are seeds that are planted in good soil and that you can have a positive outcome. So for whatever it is that you want to do, whatever it is you want to look into, don't always go seeking out the negative. Trust that there may be a positive at the end of that tunnel. You guys have been tuned in, and guess what? You've been elevated. Talk to you soon.